In the summer of last year, I shared the full coding of my Scalping EA. It got a bit of interest and a lot of people started asking me if they can apply it on Propfirm challenges. And my answer was no, because the codes were not written in a way that was suitable for Propfirm challenges. But it got me thinking if I can make the modifications and the tweaks necessary to apply it on Propfirm challenges. So today we will look at the modifications and the tweaks that I've made to the EA to make it more suitable for Propfirm challenges. In this video, we're going to look at all the modifications and the tweaks and the additional features that I've added, including a panel to track our progress. So with no more shenanigans, let's start. In order to find out if this scalping robot can even work on Propfirms, I created a new account separate from my regular one in order to just trade the scalping robot on that. I applied it on EURUSD, GBPUSD, USDJPY, Nasdaq, gold, and Bitcoin. The key settings: profile depending on whether it's a currency or other asset class on a 5-minute chart, starting at 600 hours and 2100 hours with 100 bars in. I explained the bars and in quite a bit of detail in my last video, so I'm not going to go over it today. Then standard settings for the forex pairs and these settings for the other asset classes. News filter on to avoid NFP, JOLTS, non-farm payroll and interest rate, and only for USD currencies because that moves the market really rapidly. I'm applying the RSI filter but not the moving average filter currently. And then if we look at the results, from the 1st of Jan until today, the 30th, the EA has made about 21% profit. Looking by pairs, we have 1% on USDJPY, 4% on gold with a big trade of $161, 7% on Bitcoin because Bitcoin has been in a very strong trend, 2% on GBPUSD, 5% on EURUSD, again with one big trade, and 1% on Nasdaq. Altogether 50 trades that are amounting to 21% profit. Let's look at the report. It shows the total from the mid of December when I actually created the account. We had a couple of losing trades in the beginning before I shut off the EA for Christmas and New Year. But from there on, the EA has performed really well. So there's $100 in 1 week of December and $1,000 in full month of Jan on a base of 5,000 euros. Well, not much to show in this step. Almost equal long and shorts. By symbol, as we saw, Bitcoin did very well due to a very strong trend followed by EU and gold. But most importantly, the drawdown, which was about 4% during the month, owing to a very high win rate, so consecutive losses do not happen that much. We had one loss trade on the 15th of Jan and one on the 17th of Jan. These are the only two trades that went into losses in the month of Jan. Now I cannot claim that this is how the EA is going to perform month after month, weeks after weeks, and years after years, but it does seem to have the right profile for a Propfirm challenge. Now guys, I know a lot of you rush to the store to download it. If you're not even going to spend the next 12-15 minutes to understand the functionality of the EA and its most important settings, just rushing to download and apply the EA will be completely useless. The key reason that I said this EA cannot work on a Propfirm is because it requires an extremely aggressive trading stop loss, which on my broker is not a problem because there is no limit to how close you can set a stop loss to the price. But many brokers do have that requirement, and a lot of Propfirms as well. And if the trailing stop is not going to work, the entire strategy is based on aggressive trailing, so the strategy is not going to work. So one key change that we're going to make to the EA is to check for minimum stop loss distance required by the broker. And if the user input is smaller than that, then we're going to override that input and use that minimum. So we know that the trailing stop loss will work even if at a slightly bigger distance. The second change we will make to the EA is to introduce a panel so we can track the progress on key rules at all times. And also to stop trading if a certain drawdown for a day has happened, or a certain drawdown for a week has happened, or a certain drawdown overall has happened. And we will have the ability to set these thresholds a little bit below the Propfirm challenge rules. So there is some safety margin, and if you want to change something, we still have room to do it. So let's take a look at this visually. Say we run the EA on Bitcoin. We start from the 1st of Jan until today. So we have to select the setting percentage of price profile, which you are familiar with from all of the other videos that I made on Scalping Robot. And don't worry if you're not, because we're going to go over the key settings in details anyway. We take 2% risk on every trade. We run it on 5-minute chart. And then at the bottom, you define all the Propfirm rules. You define when the challenge started so we can calculate the weeks and the months correctly, because you might start the challenge in the middle of the month. And then you define the max drawdown allowed. Say if for a day, the max allowed is 5%, then we put 3% to give ourselves a little bit of buffer and safety margin. Then if for a week the max allowed is 10%, then we set 7, and then we set the same 7 for the month, and then for the entire challenge as well. Say on the FTMO, the requirement is 5% max drawdown for a day and 10% for a month. So we keep the safety margin. Let's run a visual test so we can see how this entire thing works. The very first thing that the EA is now going to check is what is the minimum stop loss distance required by the broker. And if the input by the user is lower than that, then it will override with the broker's minimum, so we know that the trailing is going to happen. albeit at a bigger distance from the price. And then with the second modification, you can see the key stats in the panel, which is going to be on the screen. What balance did you start the challenge with? What was the balance at the beginning of the day, beginning of the week, which is then used to calculate the profit percentages at the bottom, so you know where you are versus the target. So how much profit today, this week, and overall. But more importantly, the equity high points. Because the drawdowns are not calculated versus the opening balances. They are calculated versus the highest equity points. So during the day, during the week, whenever we have hit a peak for that week, for that day, we store that point as a highest equity point and then calculate the drawdown versus that. So we look at today, the last 7 days, the last 30 days, and overall, which is the most important requirement of the prop firms, managing the drawdown. And with the modifications, you have it here in the panel in one glance. And the other setting we're going to change is the lot size setting. So before you only used to have risk as a percentage of the balance, but now you can define as fixed lots, as a percentage of balance, as a percentage of equity. So in case you have other open trades because of another year, the EA also takes that into consideration. And then also as a percentage of free margin, because if you have other trades open on the account, then free margin is more relevant than the equity itself. Depending on what you select, you need to define as a risk percentage if you are using the risk percentage, either of balance, equity, or free margin. And then if you are defining it as fixed lots, then you need to define what your fixed lots are going to be here. And the last modification that we're going to make to the EA is for the trailing stop loss. Now in the normal scalping robot video, we have the trailing stop loss as an extremely aggressive trailing stop loss. So as soon as the price moves into profit, we start trailing the stop loss very aggressively until the price comes back and hits it. But then I have also added other types of trailing stop losses. The first time the stop loss is going to move is when the price moves into profit. So it will be like the normal default trailing stop loss. But once the stop loss has moved to break even, then you can select the default trail type, which is the aggressive trail type. But now you also have the possibility to trail the stop loss on previous candle. In case of a buy, it will be trailed on the previous candle's low. And in case of a sell, it will be trailed on the previous candle's high. And then you have to define here how many candles do you want to trail it by. So if you say 1, then it's going to be on the previous candle. If you say 2, it's going to be on the previous from previous, and so on and so forth. Another way you can trail the stop loss after it has moved to break even is on fast moving average. In that case, you define what that fast moving average is going to be. So there is a little bit more distance than just the last candle or the last from last candle. And lastly, you can also decide to trail it on the Ichimoku Tenkan-sen line. In which case, once the price has moved in profit and the stop loss has moved to break even, after that, the trailing is going to happen on the Tenkan-sen line. I will share all the codes and explain them as best I can, but the panel, that is going to require quite a lot of coding, including all the MQL classes and stuff. But buckle up because it's going to be some effort. Now, before you apply this EA, you do need to understand what the EA actually does. So we need to look at the strategy as well. We define the last high and last low in the market, and then we place buy orders and sell orders. And when the price comes and hits those levels again, what we are basically banking is that the price is going to continue to move in that direction by at least another couple pips. So as soon as it moves in profit, we start trailing the stop loss extremely aggressively, which is the reason why the win rate is 90%. But this comes at a cost because the profit trades are going to be small and one stop loss hit is going to be larger. But what we're counting on is that with a high win rate, the small amount profit trades are going to more than offset that one big stop loss hit. And this brings us to the last key settings, which is the bar's N value, which is what we use to define the highs and lows in the market. So let's say if you put the value as 5, then the EA is going to try and find the price structure where there are 5 candles to the left and 5 candles to the right, all below the middle candle, and then it's going to call it a high. But if you put the value as 100, now the EA has to find a price structure where there are 100 candles on the left and 100 candles on the right, all below the middle candle, before the EA says that it is a valid high. So with a small value, you're going to get a lot of these highs, which is going to work amazingly well during a strong trend because you want to trade every time there is a new high forming. But when the markets are just simply drifting, then you don't want to be trading every small new high that appears because the price is going to take your order and then it might zigzag back to the stop loss before continuing again in the same direction. So with a higher value of 50 or 100, it's going to be on a more established price point that you place your orders, but there are going to be fewer trades. And on a smaller value, trades are going to be more frequent as the EA is going to continue to trade every new high that forms in the market. So it's a trade-off. Before we start with the modification of the EA, some of the very key settings that you definitely need to understand. The first one is the correct profile. There is the fixed pips profile, which if you select that, then you define all of the stop loss, TP, trigger of the stop loss, and the trailing stop loss here. And this one is when you're using the Forex pairs. And then there's the percentage of price profile to determine stop losses, TPs, and trailing, etc. And this is because other asset classes, they can vary in prices. So Bitcoin used to be $20,000 and $40,000 and $50,000 and now $100,000. So fixed pips on such varying prices do not make any sense at all. So for Bitcoin, gold, and Nasdaq, or Dow Jones if you want to use that, we use the percentage of price profile. And then we define the TP and the stop loss as a percentage of the price here. And then define the trigger of the trailing stop loss and the trailing stop loss as a percentage of that stop loss. So if Bitcoin was $1,000 when we took the trade, then 0.4% will equal 100,000 times 0.4%, so $400. So the TP is going to be set at 100,400 and stop loss at 99,600. And then the trailing stop loss will trigger once the price has moved in our favorable direction by 10% of the stop loss. So taking that $400, 10% of that is 40. So only when the price has moved more than $40 in profit, that's when the trailing will start. And then the trailing is 5% of the stop loss, so $20. So at any point in time, the distance between the price and the trailing stop loss will be $20 going up. And then the minimum order distance, because you cannot set an order here when the price is already above it, you need to have a distance to that order. And also we want to make sure that when we're sending the order, there is a distance between the order and the price. That's going to be based on 50% of the stop loss as well. So it's going to be $200. So the price needs to be $200 below that point where we are sending the order. Then the news filter is self-explanatory. So which news do you want to avoid and on which currencies? So for example, interest rate on USD. Then the RSI filter is to stop trading when the price is in extreme condition. So when the RSI is above 80 or below 20, on a higher time frame chart, such as 4 hours, we stop trading because now the markets can be very chaotic. And then the same for the moving average filter, but in a different way. So it looks at 200 EMA. And then we say what percentage the price needs to be away from that moving average, up or down. Let's say 3%. So if the price is that far away from the moving average, it is in an extreme condition and we don't want to be trading further, because it might revert back. Then the trading allowed by day, which is not so relevant for Forex pairs, but say Bitcoin trades over Saturday and Sunday as well, and you might not want to trade it because of lower liquidity. And lastly, the Propfirm settings. So what's the initial balance when you start the challenge? Because if you turn off the EA in the middle and then reapply it, the EA doesn't know where you started. What is the profit target? So the EA stops when it has reached that profit so as not to lose anything after that. Then what's the start date of the challenge? Because we need that to calculate the 7-day drawdown, the month drawdown, etc. And if you started the challenge in the middle of the month, the EA needs to know that. And then the max drawdown settings for the challenge. Best to keep them below the actual requirements so the EA stops with a little bit of a safety margin in case you want to make some changes. Now guys, I do have to say that I do not use Propfirms myself. I don't really see a point. I have traded myself over the years and grew a customer base and thereby a fund that I manage. Also, I believe that the business model of the Propfirms is completely based on you paying for the challenge and then losing. That's where their profits come from. Much like the video that I made on the brokers and how they stack up everything against you, I believe the Propfirms do the same, banking on you to lose the challenge so they can keep the money that you paid. And their funded accounts are probably not even funded accounts. These are just virtual accounts, as they believe that even if you pass the challenge, you will probably blow up the account anyway. But with all that said, here are the modifications required to make this scalping robot more suitable for Propfirm challenges as well, because a lot of people do want to use it. We're going to start with the scalping robot, including the gold, Bitcoin indices with the filters. So this video basically where we're going to start from. Let's first save the file as Bitcoin indices, and I'm going to change it to including mods, filters, and additional features. And two more features that we're going to add before we go to the Propfirm features are going to be, is trading allowed by which day? Because on Bitcoin, it also trades on Saturday and Sunday, and there might be a lot of people who do not want to trade on Saturdays and Sundays. And in that case, you can just simply turn this to false, and the system knows not to trade on Saturday and Sunday. And the other setting that we're going to change before we start with the Propfirm things is to have a drop down where we're going to have the lot sizes based on either fixed lots or percentage of balance or percentage of equity or percentage of free margin. And in case if we select fixed lots, then we need to say what is the value of the fixed lots. And then if we go for anything else, which is a percentage of balance, equity or free margin, then we need to input here what is that percentage. So these two features we're going to add first because they are not related to Propfirm as such. They are just general part of the scalping robot and will help everyone. And then we will focus on converting this EA to Propfirm. So back again in MetaTrader, we're starting off from where we left off in this video. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of the enums and put them together. So let's make a place above here where we're going to gather all of the enums, just to clean up a little. Only the news filter enum I'm leaving down below here because it is related only to news filter. Okay, so now we have these drop down enums that we created before. And now I'm going to add one more enum to it, which is an enum for lot type. And we're giving the values of fixed lots, percentage of balance, percentage of equity, or percentage of free margin. So now when we use this enum, the user will get this drop down possibility to select. Then we come down to common trading inputs. And this is where we will ask the user, what type of lot type do you want? So we're saying input enum lot type, which is this. So it's going to give this drop down to the user so the user can select a value, and whatever value the user is going to select, it's going to be stored in lot type. I'm putting the default value as 1, which is the percentage of balance. So when the user loads the EA in default, the default position will be percentage of balance in the drop down, but he can select now all these 4 values. And his selection will be stored in this variable that we created as lot type. Then we already have the risk percentage variable. So we only need one more variable, which is going to be fixed lots. So in case the user selects fixed lots in the dropdown, the value of the fixed lots is going to come from this variable. And then the risk percentage is from before. So we already have that. And then the rest of the time frame magic number, they remain the same. I'm currently using the EA as bars 100, so I'm going to change this to 100 as well. In fact, normally I would change it here directly, but just in case if someone is following this video, the default values that I'm using these days is bars and 100. Then nothing else changes anywhere. Then we come down to the bottom, and this is we're going to create a group, trading allowed by days, and we will create these 7 variables. So is it allowed on Monday? Is it allowed on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? And I'm setting the default value to be true. And then we're going to need one more variable for which we don't need the user input. So I'm not putting it as an input, but directly as bool. So as a true or false variable, and I'm calling it day filter on, which we're going to use to check whether or not the user has selected a certain day to be true or false. So this is for the inputs. And then to implement the first option, which was the lot type selection, we're going to go down to calculate lot size. And this is where we're going to implement the change. So we'll start with whatever is the minimum volume for that symbol on that broker. So you basically request from your broker by using the function symbol input double, sending the symbol value and asking what is the minimum volume on that pair allowed by the broker. And whatever value comes back, we store it into the lots variable. Then as we're giving the possibilities to have lot sizes defined by percentage of balance, percentage of equity, and percentage of free margin, so we need to know those values. So the first thing I'm asking is the account balance by using the function account info double and asking for the balance. Then I ask for the equity value and store it into a double variable equity balance. And lastly, we get the free margin value. So what is the free margin on the account as we speak now? So we get that value from the broker as well. Because you might have a few open trades from another EA, or if you're manually trading in the same account, then you might be interested in getting the free margin and basing your lot sizes on the free margin and not the equity or account. And then instead of simply assigning the risk value using the account balance, now we have to see what has the user selected. So I'll start with the risk value as 0, and then I'm going to switch between the lot types. So the variable that we created up top, the lot type, which is this drop down. So whatever the user has selected here, we stored that value into this lot type variable. And now we're going to switch between those values. So we're going to go through all of the values one by one. I open the bracket, so I need to close it. And then within this function, we're going to switch between different values. So we say if the case is 0, which is the fixed lots, then the lots are equals to the fixed lots variable, which is the variable we created here. In that case, assign that fixed lots value to the lots variable that we have created here, and then just return. So exit the function. Don't need to do anything else. We have already assigned the lots value. But then if the value is 1, which is the percentage of account balance, in that case, we say risk is going to be whatever is the account balance that we have gotten here, multiplied by the risk percentage variable that the user is defining here. We don't return like here because if that is the case, then we need to continue. But in that case, we say break, meaning if this was the case and you have done this, break this function, don't do anything here, and then go on to these lines. Then exactly in the same way, we say if the case was 2, then the risk equals equity balance times the risk percentage. And if the case selected by the user is 3, then it's free margin times the risk percentage, which is to say here, this is case 0, case 1, case 2, and case 3. In every case, we break. In this case, we don't have to, but a good practice to break the function. So when the system is going to come here, it's going to start with lot size as minimum, then it's going to get the values of these, then it's going to start with the risk value of 0, and then it's going to go through the lot type, switch through it, and then depending on whether the user has selected fixed lots, account balance, equity, or free margin, it's going to assign either the lots directly and then exit the function, or it's going to assign the value of risk in absolute terms, so that then we can run the rest of the function to calculate and then return the lots. Nothing else changes in this function. So we compile and we get one error, which is the variable is already defined because we already defined the variable last time and now we're defining it again. So this is the definition now, and this is just the assignment. If I compile again, then we have 0 error. And then if I go back to MetaTrader, now we have this drop down available to us. And depending on what you select, the system is going to calculate the lot sizes based on whatever you select here, either using the percentage value for these 3 options, or in case of a fixed loss, it's just going to take the fixed loss from here. So that's the first change that we make. And then for the second change, which is about whether or not trading is allowed on a certain day, let's go down to the bottom and we'll create one more function. Let's call that function is trading allowed by day. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an MQL date time variable, and call it today. An MQL date time variable is a variable that stores the value of the date time separately for the number of days, the month, the year, and everything that way. So for example, if you had to say today and then you hit dot, you will get the value of day, day of the week, year, hour, minute. So it breaks down into a structure, the MQL date time, which has now that structure. So by day, day of the week, hour, minute, so we can break it down the time. And that then gives us the possibility to create a variable, a string variable, day to day, which is what is the date today. And then we can say, convert the enum to string, get the today's day of the week value, which is basically this, today, day of the week, whatever is the day of the week. So is it day 1, day 2, day 3? Take that, convert it from the number of the day to the name of the day. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And because it's going to return the value as an enum, so we need to convert it into a string. So we say enum to string. Therefore, we're going to get the value of Monday or Tuesday as a string that we store into day to day. And then the life becomes very easy because we just simply say if the allowed Monday is true, which is here, we're asking the user is trading on Monday allowed. If it is true, and the day to day value which is returned is Monday, and it's all in caps. This is how the value comes back. So it's not going to work if you write it like this or if you write it like this. A lot of people make the mistake of not following the case. MQL is case sensitive. So you need to say Monday all in caps. So if Monday allowed is true and day-to-day value returned by this function is Monday, so just return the value of true from here. So exit the function and return the value true. And we do the same for all the rest of the days. So if allowed Tuesday is true and return value of this function is Tuesday, then fine. If trading is allowed on Wednesday and today is Wednesday, then of course return true, and so on and so forth until Sunday. Now, if any of this value was false, so if the user had selected false here, then of course allowed Sunday is going to be false and day-to-day return will be Sunday, so then this function is going to return the value of false. And then following the logic that we had here for printing the messages for RSI, for MA filter, for RSI filter, and for news filter, we're going to use the same logic to say that if trading enabled com is equal to blank, so there is no value in the trading enabled com, which, just to refresh the memory, is a string that we created here in the global variables to store whatever comment we want to send. So if that value is blank, that means there is no comment stored. Or if the table enabled value is printed, because once we print the value once, we will change the value of this variable to printed. In that case, we don't want to print it again and again and again. So either if it's blank or its value is not equal to printed, that means then we need to print a new message. So then we say trading enabled com becomes trading is not allowed plus whatever is the value of the day coming from here. And then if none of the above is true, then just return false. And that covers this function. Let's compile it. We don't have any error so far. So now we have created the function and now we need to use it. So we go back up here on the onTick function where we were always checking for all the filters, the news filter, the RSI filter, the MA filter. We're going to add one more condition here that if the value of the is trading allowed by day comes back as a false, and this is why saying not is trading allowed by day, because if it is allowed, then it's going to come back as true. And if it's not allowed, then it's going to come back as false. So in case if it's false, then you need to close all of the orders which are currently on the broker server. You need to change the trading enabled to false, change the color of the chart to whatever the user has selected as to be the color of the chart when the trading is off. And then if the enabled com is not equals to printed, then print the new comment that we just wrote here. The trading is not allowed on certain day. Print that, and then after you have printed, change the trading enabled com variable to printed. So the next time the EA goes here, oh, but it is equal to printed. So this condition is false. So it's not going to print it again. Otherwise, you're going to have a list of the same message going until the time the trading is enabled again. It will just continue. And this is why we use this logic of printed. Print and then return, meaning exit this entire function of onTick. Don't run these codes below. Now, one thing you can do to make the EA a little bit more efficient is take the if is new bar and move it up here to after the trailing stop. Because everything before this is going to be run on every tick. And I don't know if you want to run this on every tick. Maybe you just want to check it on every new candle, which is going to be every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes. If you do want to check it on every tick, then you just need to leave it here and have this still above. I prefer to change it to checking on every bar because you're not going to be running this scalping EA on a 4-hour chart. So it might still be okay to check for these conditions every 10 minutes, 5 minutes or 15 minutes. But if you are planning to use it on a 1-hour chart, better to leave it below here. So in that case, the EA doesn't end up checking for these conditions every hour, it checks it on every tick. So that's the trade-off. If I compile, I have no error. And now we have in our scalping robot the possibility to assign the lot sizes by fixed lots, as percentage of balance, percentage of equity, or percentage of free margin. And also we have the ability to say whether or not to trade on a specific day. So this covers the first part, which is the normal scalping EA additional features. And now we can move on to the stuff that we have added for Propfirms. So we start now with the scalping robot, including mods, filters, and additional features. And we save it as another file into a new folder, and let's call it Scalping Propfirm, and use an underscore or something, because the way that we're going to write the code, we're going to have to reference this file location. In that case, there can be no spaces. So I'm putting it as scalping underscore propfirm, and then I'm going to call this scalping underscore propfirm version. Once again with underscores because we cannot have spaces. So now that we have that, we create a new, and this time we're going to have an include file because that's where we're going to create our panel. So we're going to create an include file and let's call it propfirm panel. Again, you cannot have spaces, so I'm combining it together as propfirm panel, and it's in the include folder, and we hit finish. And this is what you're going to get as the MPH file. I'll clean it up. So you're basically left with this. Then we're going to use two include files, which are here in the controls, the dialog, and the level. And what this does is it gives us all of these pre-written codes that MQL has written so that we don't have to write it, and we can use it by referencing. And the dialog is going to create that small panel within which we're going to have all our stats. And levels are basically levels, so it's text that you can write within that dialog. So we're going to reference to these two files. Then we're going to create an input group and call it panel parameters, because this is where we're going to store all of the variables where we ask the user to provide their input. And here we're going to ask the user how much should be the width of the panel and how much should be the height of the panel, so they can adjust it. Then for the text size within the panel, what text size do they want, so they can increase or decrease the font size if they want to. And then we're going to ask them for 2 more colors. So for example, if your target profit is 10%, once that target profit is hit 10%, we're going to stop the trading. But we also want to change the color of the chart to something else so that the user can in one glance see that, oh, it's green now. So that means that the entire target has been achieved. And also when the drawdown has been exceeded for that day or for that week, we also want to turn off the trading, but we also want to change the color of the chart then to whichever color the user selects, that they can see in one glance that the trading is disabled. And then they can look around, okay, why is it disabled and what do they need to do? So we're going to ask for these 2 colors as well. And then we're going to create a class and we're going to call it C Propfirm panel. That's the name of the panel that we're going to create. And we're going to use the C app dialog function from the dialog include file. And it's going to be a public function, so other functions and other files can access it as well. We close it here. Okay, then we create 2 different parts of this class. One is the private and the other part is public. So everything that we're going to write here is going to be accessible only to this function. And this portion that we're going to write here in the public section is going to be available to not only this MQH file, but also anything that's referencing to this MQH class is also going to be able to use it. In the private class, we're going to create a bool function by the name create panel, which we're going to have to create here as bool create panel. So this is a function that we're going to write later, but we're going to be able to call this function from the private portion of this C Propfirm panel that we have created here. And then within the public section, we have to create a constructor for Propfirm panel, which is going to be exactly the same name as here. So these 2 names should be exactly the same. And then we also need a deconstructor, which is with this tilde sign before the C Propfirm panel name, which is going to be used to destroy this panel. Then once we have created it, we also need to initialize it. So we're going to create a bool function by the name onInit. To keep it different from the onInitialization function here, we're going to use a lowercase for init so that we can distinguish between the 2. And the last one is going to be a function by the name panel chart event, where we're going to create the panel chart events. And these are standard values that you need to send to this chart event. So it's ID, it's long parameter, it's double parameter, and it's string parameter. So just copy it like this exactly. And now let's create this function at the bottom. And within classes, you have to create the functions like this. So you say void and then reference to the class. And then with these 2 colons, then you give it the name of the function. So the name of the function is C Propfirm panel in the class C Propfirm panel. And we don't need to write anything within. So we just open the function and close the function. And same as for the constructor, we also need to create one for the deconstructor as well. So it's going to be again the same. So it's in the class C Propfirm panel, but the function is with the tilde so that it's basically referencing to this. Then we need to create this onIt function, which is going to be exactly the same way. So we say bool and the name of the class and then the name of the function. We open the bracket and here we create the panel by saying that if this, meaning this class, this function, when you create the panel, this is a not sign. So if this is not successful, then return the value false. So basically run it. But if it fails to run, then return the value of false. Otherwise return true. And then we close the bracket to close the function. And this create panel function, we also should have written it exactly the same way. Within this class type C Propfirm panel, create a function by the name of create panel. And within there, we're going to do exactly the same thing as for onInit. So we say if we create this by saying this.create and then passing on the values. Null is the chart. This is the name. These are the width parameters. And here we're going to use the input width and input height parameters from here. And otherwise, if it fails to create it, then return the value of false. After that, we ask to run this, try to run it. And if it's not run, meaning if you fail to run it, then return false. Otherwise, redraw the chart by saying chart redraw and return the value true. So if you're able to run this, then chart redraw and then return the value true. If I compile it, I forgot to put a colon here. If I put a colon and then compile, yeah, we don't have any error. So now that we have this, we can go back to our Scalping Propfirm version that we had created. And now here we can reference to this file by saying include Propfirm panel, so this file, .mqh, which is saved in the include folder as propfirmpanel.mqh. This is the one that we have just written. If I compile it now, it says that the declaration of POS hides the overall. So I'll change all of the POS to POS info and POS.info. We go to the top. So POS info and POS.info. And then we have match whole words only. So in that case, it's going to pick up here, for example, POS.select. So that's fine to replace. This is okay to replace. So wherever there was POS dot, where we were using the POS value to get the position info, I'm changing it to position info because I think MQL uses POS somewhere else as a variable. So this is it. Wherever there was POS, we change it to POS info, and let's compile to see. Yeah, everything is fine now. So we included this file. So now we should be able to add the class that we add as Propfirm panel. So this class that we have written here, that we can now call here. And within that, and I am assigning it to a variable that I'm going to call panel. So now this panel is basically referencing to this class cPropfirm panel that we have just created. And with that, now I can go down to our initialization function. And here, after putting the magic number, now I can reference to that panel variable that I've just created. And I can reference to its onInit function that we have created here, which is going to create the panel and then return true. So we can say onInit and then that. And if we started, then we also have to, on deinitialization, we need to destroy it. So I'm going to say destroy, and I'm just going to say reason. So whatever is the reason. If I compile it now, don't have an error still. And now if I go back to MetaTrader, then here, this new one that we have just created, if I attach it to the chart, I'm seeing the panel appear here. And the panel says challenge stats, which is the name that we have given here as challenge stats. This is the input width and input height here. And if I now look into the settings, I will also see these panel parameters, which we have created in the Propfirm panel. So even though they are not here, they are still accessible because we are referencing to this file. So it's picking up all of the input values from here as well. This is how we create the panel. And now we will need to start getting the values that we want to assign here and actually putting these values and refreshing them. If I open up the one that I've already written and apply that one, the one which is already complete, then we're going to see this panel. So this is the end result of the panel writing. What you're going to see is 4 categories of stats. So beginning balance, equity, high, drawdown, and profit. And within each one of them, there are 4 levels. So we're going to look at the beginning balance and equity high and the drawdown and the profit as today, 7 days, 30 days, and all time. So these are the total stats that we will collect and we will print into the panel. So this is what it needs to look like in the end. So altogether, we're looking at 20 different levels that we need to create. So I'm going to go back to Meta Editor, and within the private section is where we're going to start creating these labels. The first one is beginning balance with these 4 stat types. So here I'm creating 5 different labels. The first one is beginning balance, and the other 4s are these ones. So I'm calling it BB for beginning balance. So beginning balance 1 day, beginning balance 7 days, beginning balance 30 days, and beginning balance all time. Then I'm going to do the same for equity high. So I'm creating equity high and then shortening it to EH, equity high 1 day, equity high 7 day, equity high 30 day, and equity high all time. Then the next one is for drawdown. So I'm creating these 5, the C-level drawdown, and then drawdown day 1, drawdown 1 day, drawdown 7 days, drawdown 30 days, and drawdown all time. And then the last one is for profit. So I'm creating these 5 for profit. So profit 1 day, profit 7 day, profit 30 day, and profit all time. And this is where we're going to print all of these labels, which are going to be printed here. Now that we have these labels, we can go down to the create panel. And after creating the panel, that's where we're going to start creating these labels. So if I write the first one, which is the beginning balance, this one, and if you open the bracket, you're going to see that it asks for the chart value. So the chart value is 0 because we're going to apply it on the current chart. Then what's the name of that? So it's beginning balance. Then the sub window is 0. And where do we want to print it? So I'm giving it from the X and Y, 10 and 10, and then 1 and 1 for the Y value 2 and Y value. So these two are important. And then the X value and the Y value on the axis of where I want to print it within the panel. So if I say 10 and 10, that means it's going to be printed 10 pixels from the X and 10 pixels from the Y. If I said 50, it would be printed somewhere here with 50 distance to the X and 50 distance to the Y. Then for the X2 and Y2 value, I'm just giving it 1 and 1. And then once we have created it, we have to give it values. So what's the value of this beginning balance label that we create? And I'm giving it the text beginning balance, which is going to appear here as beginning balance. What's the color? And I'm giving it the color of gold. So it's going to appear like this. And then what's the font size? And for the font size, I'm saying whatever the user has put here, that plus 1. So whatever the user has put is going to be this. So just to make it a little bit bigger, so I'm saying plus 1. So this is how I create this. And once we have created this, we have to add this. So we say this, meaning within this panel, add this one, beginning balance, add it. And you do this by saying this, and then when you open it up, you say add, and then you have to give it which control to add, and that is the beginning balance. We do exactly the same for the next one, which is going to be BP 1 day. This one, the beginning balance at the beginning of today. So now we create that, and now for the X and Y value, I'm giving it 50 and 30. So it is 50 from the X and 30 from the Y. Then we update the value of the text to today equals, and this is what we will create later. So I'll remove it for now. So today equals, and then giving spaces, 3 spaces, because we need to line it up properly. But that you can then play around how many spaces before the T and how many spaces after the T to line this equal signs properly. Then the color of the text is going to be whatever the user selects here, and the font size to whatever the user selects here. Now I'm going to repeat the same process for the other 4. So for the 7 day, we say BB_7 day, and then we create and give it a label, BB 7 day. And now I'm keeping this value, the X value the same as 50. So it's going to be X value Y is the same distance from the X, but from the Y, I need to now increase the value. So it's not overlapping, but it's below it. So I'm giving it the value 45. So 15 pixels more. So it will be 15 pixels below the today value. Then the text is going to be 7 days equal, and the rest remains the same. And here then we add that label as BB 7 day. Then the same thing for 30 day. We're going to create the BB 30 day. So this one here, BB 30 day label. We use that label and create it, giving it the name BB 30 days. And now again, X value as 50, but now we're increasing the value as 15. So from 30 to 45 to 60. So from 30 to 45 to 60 in Y axis. I'll remove this for now because we're going to add that later. And then again, the input text color, the font size, and then we say add this to the panel, this label. And then finally, the all time. So we say beginning balance, all time, again create, and I'm keeping the X value as 50, but then increasing the Y value at 75, just to have that level of distance between, so that there is no overlap. We're going to create the text as all time high, same input of color, and then we add this to the panel. So if I compile it now here, and then go back to Scalping Propfirm version and compile that as well. And then if we go back to MetaTrader and apply our EA, now I should see the panel here, and these 4 text in labels that we had put in today, 7 days, 30 days, and all time high, they're all appearing here. Now let's change the color of the background first so that we can see it more clearly. I'll remove the EA and we go back here. And to do that, we're going to go back to our Propfirm panel, go back up to the top, and here at the very top, we're going to include control/defines.mqh. So within the controls, this file defines, and this one lets us define or undefine the properties of the panel. 2 values that we're going to undefine are the background. So we say #undefined, and controls dialog color client background. I mean, when you're typing it, it's going to pop up. So background. And the second one is the controls font name. so that we can choose whatever font we want to use. And then we're gonna define the value of the controls dialog as color midnight blue. And we will define the controls font name as Consolas. And that's the font that we're gonna use. It takes exactly the same amount of space for a character, so it's gonna line up everything properly. So if I compile it now, I don't have any error. And now I need to go back to the Scalping Propfirm version and compile that as well. And now if I go back to MetaTrader, and now we apply our Scalping Robot, Propfirm version, now we see that the background color has changed and the font has changed as well. And with this font, we are able to line up the dashes exactly in order. So this is the beginning balance section. So with today, 7-day, 30-day, and all time, and we're going to get the values of this here from the Propfirm version. But we haven't defined the variables yet. But let's first complete the panel. So we go back to the panel. By the way, this needs to be right at the top even before anything starts. So we are redefining everything about the panel at the very top. So down here, I'll continue adding our labels. So then we put the equity high, and now I'm taking it back to the X value of 10, like the label here at the beginning. And then on the Y axis, I'm giving it a distance of 25. So instead of 15, I'm giving it 25 so that there is a little bit more space. Just to see it in action, if I compile both files now, and then we go back to our MetaTrader, you see this one is lined up with the beginning balance. And this is why we had a distance of 10. And there is a little bit more distance between all time and equity, because the distance here is 15 and distance here is 25. So the distance between these were 15 and the distance between this one is 25. Then the next one is for 1 day, again going back to 50 and having a distance of 20 to have a little bit more distance than 15. I'm going to remove the variable now and then adding this to the panel. Once again, if I compile and we go back to MetaTrader, now we see today as well. This is lined up at 50x, so it's more lined up with this one rather than that one. Coming back to Propfirm panel, and now I'm going to add these three. So now the 7-day, again giving it a distance of 15 again, 15 again, and 15 again, 30D, and all time. Exactly the same way. Then we're going to create the drawdown. So we create, and this one is going back again to the X value of 10 because that is the yellow label. And I'm giving a distance of 35. Just to compile it now. We were missing the closing here. If I compile it now and compile the Scalping Propfirm version, and we go back to MetaTrader, now we see the drawdown menu appearing here as well. Now we need to put today, 7-day, 30-day, and all-time high here. So we go back to Propfirm panel and we create the 1 day. Giving it again the X value of 50 and then a distance of 30, then the 7-day, 30-day, and all time. And again, keeping the value of X at 50, increasing this by 15. Once again, if I compile and compile the Propfirm version, we see now these 4 here as well. And then at the bottom, now we create the profit. Exactly the same way as before, just changing names, the values of the Y, the name of the text, and adding this. And then we do the same for 1 day, 7-day, 30-day, and all time. Keeping the distances in the order that this to this has 35. Between these, there's 15 pixel. Between the last one and this one is 25, and then the cycle continues. So if I compile it now and compile the Scalping Propfirm version as well, we should now see our entire panel. The values are still not there because we still haven't assigned them. Okay, now that we have this panel, now we need to start updating the values here. So for that, we need to go back to Meta Editor and we need to create these variables where we're going to store the values. Now, this file is for the panel. This is where our EA is going to run. So all of the variables and all of the values are going to come from here. So at the top, I'm going to create these variables that I'm going to need to use. And these are the ones that I'm creating. So a double, which is a variable that can store decimal values. And here I'm creating beginning of day balance, beginning of week balance, beginning of month balance. Then to populate the drawdowns and profits, we're going to go drawdown 1 day percentage, drawdown 7-day percentage, drawdown 30-day percentage, all-time percentage, and same for the profit. 1 day, 7-day, 30-day, and all-time, so that we can populate the values here. So this is where we're going to use these variables. And then for the equity, I'm creating also the 1 day, 7-day, 30-day, and all-time, which are going to be used here. This beginning balance, beginning of week balance, beginning of month balance, that's going to be used here. Then I need a start day of the challenge, because if you start the challenge in the middle of the month, then the EA needs to know that. And then an MQL date time format. MQL date time format is the one where you can split the day and the day of the week and hours and months. And I'm creating a variable and calling it challenge start. And then let's go down below at the bottom after where we had the trading allowed by day profile section, and let's create a section where we're going to ask the user to provide the values for the Propfirm challenge. And there I'm creating an input group by the name of Propfirm values, Propfirm rule settings. And here I'm asking the user now for input by variable initial balance. So what is the initial balance you're starting with? What is the profit target? That is a double because it could be in decimals. And what is the start of the challenge as a date time? What is the challenge length? So how many days? What's the maximum drawdown allowed per day, per week, per month, and in total? And if I compile it now and go back to MetaTrader, then we see this panel appearing here as initial balance 1000. And here the user can select which date does he start the challenge, and then all of the rest of the values. Then we go to onInit function, and here we can start by putting the value that we got from the user, the start of challenge here, which was in a date time format, and we're going to put this value into the challenge start variable that we created here in MQL date time. So we're basically using time to structure and taking the date time variable and putting the value of that date time variable into the MQL date time variable. So we have the breakdown by day, by hour, by month, etc., etc. And this variable then is string variable, which is the start day of challenge. This is where we're going to store the value of which day was it when the challenge started. And we do it exactly the same way as we did it before. So we get the challenge start, this variable in MQL date format. So we get the challenge start, and then we get the day of the week, which is going to be either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever it is going to come back as an enum end of the week. We need to convert it into a string. So we say enum to a string, enum day of the week, challenge start day, day of the week, and store that value as Monday or Tuesday, whatever comes back as a string into the start day of the challenge. Then we get the beginning balances. At the start of the challenge, or when you are starting the initialization, the beginning of the day would be the same as the beginning of the week, which will be the same as the beginning of the month balance. So we get the account balance and we put the value into beginning of day, beginning of week, and beginning of month balance. So at the start, it's all going to be exactly the same, which is 1,000 euros or $1,000 that we start with. Then we go down to the bottom, and this is where we're going to update the values on every candle. So we create a function by the name of update initial balance. And let's close the function here. So we have the initial balances now, but we're going to update them on every candle because the values are going to keep changing depending on the day and the week. We start by creating a variable previous check as an MQL date time static, and then we create a variable of now, and then we store the value of the current time into now by saying time current and storing that value into the now variable that we just created. This way we can create a check that if this is not equal to now, that means that a new candle has opened, and therefore we say if now.day is not equal to previous check.day, so the day has changed. We're going to check it on every candle, and as soon as the now, the day of the now, the time current is not equal to whenever we previously checked the day of that, that means it's a new day. So we're going to update the beginning of the day balance by getting the account info double. Account balance today, we're going to update the value of the equity high of 1 day to the beginning of day balance. So at the beginning of the day, we're going to take the beginning of the day balance. Also, the equity would be the same at that point in time. And then we're going to reset the value of the drawdown of 1 day percentage to 0, profit 1 day percentage to 0. And then we're going to put the value of now into the previous check. So the next time the EA comes back here, now.day will be equal to previous check. So it's not going to do this until the time the day changes. So this is how we loop through and check that it's a new day. And if it's a new day, then we update these values. Then we update the values at the end of 7-day period. So whenever you started from there until the end of the week, so that when the new week starts, And this is where we're going to create another datetime variable as a static. So it's created once, and we're going to call it underscore 7-day period. In MQL, you cannot start a variable by a numeral. And this is why we start with underscore 7-day period. And that's going to be equal to the start of the challenge. And then we say if time current is greater than 7-day period. So whatever value we have stored in it, if the time current is bigger than that, then we know it's a new week, because the first time is going to be a new week as soon as the challenge starts. So the time current is going to be bigger than whatever is the start of the challenge. Then we update the value of the beginning of the week balance, the 7-day high of the equity to the same amount, and then reset the value of the drawdown and the profit for the 7-day percentages to 0. And then we change the value of the 7-day period by increasing it by whatever is the number of seconds in 7 days. And this you do by looking at, okay, well, how many seconds are there in 1 day, and then multiply it by 7. So the total amount is going to be 7 days worth of seconds, and that we add into 7-day period. So the next time when the EA comes, only when the time current becomes bigger than 7 days after the last check, that's when these codes are going to be run. Then using the same logic, we update the value of the 30 days. So we start again with a static datetime variable of underscore 30 days period, starting at the start of the challenge. So the first time is just going to be whenever the time current is bigger than that. We're going to set the beginning of the month balance and the equity high balance both to the starting account balance, have these percentages as 0, and then add to it 30 days worth of seconds. So again, seconds within 1 day, multiply by 30 and add it by saying plus equals to, add it to this variable. So the next time the EA comes here, the time current is only going to be bigger than this variable once 30 days have passed. So this is how we check for 30 days. Let's compile it to see if we have any errors. We don't have any errors. So then we can go on to update the values. Because here we're setting up the beginning balances at the beginning of the day, at the beginning of the 7 days, at the beginning of 30 days. And now we will update the values as we go along on every candle. So we create another function and call it update propfirm values. We start by getting the equity value of the account. And then we say that if the beginning of the day balance is not equal to 0, so if it has a value, then profit for 1 day percentage is equal to whatever is the equity at that point in time minus the beginning of the day balance times 100 divided by the beginning of the day balance. So this is how we calculate what is the percentage for today is. And then if equity is higher than the equity 1 day, which we had updated in the previous section, if it is higher than the beginning of the day, then we change equity high for today to equity. Then we create a double variable, call it the current 1 day drawdown, and that will be equal to wherever is the equity minus the high equity, whatever is the new high, times 100 and divided by that equity high of 1 day. So that's going to give us the current drawdown if there is any. So on a new candle, if you had a position which was in loss, then your equity is going to be lower than whatever was the high of the equity for that day. And this is why we calculate the current drawdown. And then if the current drawdown is smaller, because it's a negative number, so if the current drawdown is smaller than whatever was the percentage of that at the start of the day, then we store that value into the drawdown of 1 day percentage so that we can use it in the panel to show. Then we do the same thing for the beginning of the week. So we start with if the beginning of the week balance is not equal to 0, then we say that the profit on every candle in percentage is equal to whatever is the equity right now minus whatever was the balance at the beginning of the day times 100 divided by the balance at the beginning of the week will give us whatever is our profit this week, positive or negative. And then if the equity is higher than the equity value of 7 days, which in the starting is going to be 0, but then if it becomes bigger, because we need to continue updating the value of the equity on every candle. So if it is higher than the 7-day equity high, whatever it was before, then store that value into the equity 7-day high, and then check for the current drawdown by saying equity minus whatever is the high of the equity times 100 divided by the 7-day equity high. And if the current drawdown is lower than whatever is the drawdown for the 7-day percentage, then set the 7-day percentage drawdown to current drawdown. So as soon as there is a lower drawdown than whatever was before, we update the value to a lower drawdown. Then we do the same for the beginning of the month. So starting with beginning of the month balance, if it's not equal to 0, then the profit percentage is whatever is the equity right now minus whatever was the beginning balance of the month divided by the beginning balance of the month times 100. And if equity is higher than whatever is the equity high of 30-day, then store that value into the equity high of 30-day, so that when the equity grows, we continue to grow our equity high value. Because drawdown is always calculated against whatever is the highest point of the equity, not the beginning balance. Then check the current drawdown versus this equity by saying whatever is the current equity minus whatever is the highest equity during the last 30 days divided by the highest equity during the last 30 days times 100. And if it is lower than whatever is stored before, then store the new current drawdown value into the 30-day percentage for drawdown. And then we do the same for the all-time. And this is where we start with the initial balance. If it is higher than 0, because initial balance is defined by the user, so we're using that value. And then do the same thing. So the profit all-time will be equal to whatever is the equity now minus the initial balance divided by the initial balance times 100. And then we check if the equity on this candle is higher than the equity all-time that we had already stored, then replace that value. And then check for the drawdown all-time by using the same calculation as before. And then if the current drawdown is smaller than, because it's a negative value, if it's a smaller than whatever was stored before, then store the new value into this variable. So this is how we update the value of the percentage for the profit, the value of the 7-day equity high, and the value of the highest drawdown versus that equity. So if I compile it now, I don't have any errors. So we can proceed to the next step, which is to disable the trading if the drawdown exceeds a certain number. So we're asking the user here, what are the percentages which are allowed for the drawdown for day, for week, for 30 days, and for the entire challenge. So this is where we're going to check for that. Having calculated everything here, it becomes very easy, because we say if the drawdown 1-day percentage that we are calculating here, if that becomes bigger than minus max drawdown, because we're asking the user for the input and they're going to provide the input as 3, but the drawdown is in negative numbers, so it's minus 3. So if it is smaller than minus 3, then if trading enabled comment is printed, then make the trading enabled comment as trading disabled, max drawdown for the day exceeded, and return the value as false. So then the trading is not allowed because of that. Then we do the same for 7 days. So checking the 7-day drawdown percentage variable that we have updated here versus whatever is max allowed. And then if it is lower than that, then we need to disable the trading. So if the trading enabled comment is not equals to printed, and you understand the logic of printed from the last time, then change the trading enabled comment to this and then return false, meaning that the trading is not allowed. Same for 30 days and same for all time percentages. And then at the end, we check for the profit percentages by saying if the profit all time percentage is higher than the profit target, then return the comment of trading enabled as hooray, the target has been achieved, because that basically means that all-time high profit here is bigger than whatever was the profit target defined by the user. So now we don't want to trade anymore because we have already achieved that target. And this is why we say disable the trading, return this comment, and return false, meaning now trading is not allowed anymore because we have achieved the target. And if none of the above, then return true, meaning that the trading is allowed. So 1-day drawdown is not less than whatever is the max. 7-day drawdown is not lower than whatever is the max. 30-day is also not lower than whatever is the 30-day max, and same for the all-time. So now we have that function as well. Let's compile to see if there are any errors. I don't have any errors. So now we can go back up to the onTick function. And here after the isNewBar function, and after having checked if the trading is allowed for the day, before we do anything else, we will update the initial balances, which is going to run this function to update the values of the beginning of the day, beginning of the week, and beginning of the month balances. Then we will update the Propfirm values, which is going to run this function to update the percentages. And then we're going to run the function of is trading allowed. So we have updated the beginning balance for the day, 7 days, and 30 days. Then we have updated the current drawdown percentage, profit percentage, etc. And now we can check whether or not the trading is allowed by running this function. And if trading is allowed, then only the EA is going to run the code. And to ensure that, we're going to bring down this portion from above to below, so here. So once we have checked if the trading is allowed, then we will add another value here by saying if not is trading allowed, then also run these codes. Before we started, we had these three filters. Then we added the filter of is trading is allowed by day, and now we are also adding the if trading is allowed by the Propfirm values. So when the EA comes here on a new bar, it will update the initial balance, it will update the Propfirm values, and then it will check whether or not the trading is allowed by coming down here. And if the value turns out to be false, then this value is going to be true, which is not is trading allowed, so meaning it's false. And in that case, close all the order, disable the trading, set the chart value to whatever is the chart color trading off. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to simplify these input variables, because here we have crypto profile, gold profile, and indices profile, but they're practically the same because they're looking at the TP as a percentage of the price. So instead of having these three, we're just going to go for one. So I'll delete these two, and we're going to change this input group value from crypto input to as a percentage of price profile. Then we have the TP as percentage, stop loss as percentage, then TP and stop loss as a percentage TSL, and trigger as a percentage of the stop loss. And then we're going to add order distance point as well as a percentage of stop loss. And we can move this order distance point from here, which was related to Forex profile, down below here, and make it an input variable as well, so that the user can add values to it and call it input. And we can also move these double variables from here again down below, because these are also related to Forex. So I'm going to move them here, and I will add to it order distance point, but without the word input. So we're going to collect the input here, and then we're going to pass on this input to order distance point, so either from here or from here when we are into the on initialization function. Pink looks really bad to me, so I'm going to change this to purple, the trading off color, and the trading on color is still black. And we can move this from here, as it is not related to common, into up here, just to clean it up. Then I'm deleting the integer system choice, because we're simply going to use the system type, and then removing the spaces. So this is the start hour, end hour. I'm removing the SH choice and end hour choice, because we're simply going to use the S type here, and I think we're good to go. If I compile now, I get all of these errors because we haven't changed the values in the onInit function where we were assigning these values. So this I don't need anymore, so I'll remove it. This we don't need anymore as well, so I'm going to remove that as well, because we don't have the system type 2 and system type 3 anymore. We only have system type 0 and system type 1. Let's rewrite this to enum system type, and then fixed pips profile and percentage of price profile. So we're not going to use this anymore, we're going to use this one. So I'm going to delete this one, and then let's go down to here. We don't need these system types because we don't have system type 2 and 3. And this is where we were putting the initial default values. But now we're going to switch between the system type, which is going to be coming from here, the system type. And we need to change this to enum system type, because that's the new name, system enum type. So the value is going to be coming from here as either 0 or 1. So if it is 0, which is the fixed pips profile, then here at the initialization of the function, we're going to say if the case of the system type is 0, then the TP points are equal to TP points input, which are coming from the Forex profile here. So it's all going to come from here, the Forex profile. So if the system type is 0, then TP points are equal to TP points input, SL points, so whatever the user has provided as input. And then also the order distance point. So Forex profile, then TP point, SL point, trigger point, and the TSL point are all going to be coming from the Forex inputs. Same goes for the order distance point. And then we break because we're using the case. So if that is the case, do all of this and then break from this function. But if it is case 1, then we say that the TP points, SL point, order distance point are now going to be dependent on the values provided in the percentage of price input. And here we're collecting the values as percentages, so we need to do the calculations. So the first one would be TP points is going to be equal to whatever is the ask in the market times whatever is the TP as a percentage. And for that, we need to have the ask. So we create the variable up above here as ask, and we get the value by using the function symbol input double, sending the symbol value and asking for the symbol ask value. And then we divide it by 100 because it is a percentage. But then let's say if Bitcoin price is 100,000, then 0.4% of that is going to be 100,000 times 0.4% equals 400. So that is the stop loss. But if you look at the value of Bitcoin, it has 2 decimal places after the dot as well. So the actual stop loss is going to be 400.00. So there needs to be 2 more zeros after that as well. And this we achieve by dividing it by the point value. So dividing it by whatever is the point value, so that we are converting this TP points into points instead of a number of dollars. So then the value is going to be returned as, because there are 2 dots, so the value is going to become 400 and then 2 more dots, so 40,000. But then when we will actually be sending the order, we're multiplying the TP points and SL points by the points as well. So we're converting it back into 400. So this is why we will need to divide it by points here, so that these values are converted into points rather than just dollar values. Then because these are going to be in points, so then we can use this SL point value to calculate the order distance point, TSL points and trigger point by multiplying it by whatever is the user input divided by 100 because it's a percentage, and then break. And then we close the switch function. Then the next thing we're going to do is at the very beginning or initialization, we're going to check what is the stop level, because different brokers have different requirements for how far away from the price the stop loss should be. So when we're trailing the stop loss, we need to be careful that the value provided for the trailing stop loss by the user is actually bigger than what is required by the broker. Because if it's not, then the trailing stop will never work. So we check by using the symbol info integer, sending the value of the symbol and asking for what is the trading stop levels. And because it's returned as a long value and we are storing it into integer, so we use the word integer in front to convert it into integer and then storing the value into stop level. So now we know what is the broker's requirement, and let's print that value by using the print command and saying minimum loss distance required by the broker on whatever is the symbol is whatever is the stop level in points. And then we compare that the TSL points that are either coming out of this calculation here or are coming out of the user provided input for the Forex profile. If those are smaller than what the broker requires, then we print that the trailing stop loss value of whatever is the correct calculated value or the user provided value is smaller than allowed by the broker. Therefore, we are overriding to broker minimum of whatever is the stop level points accepted by the broker. And then we convert the TSL points to whatever is the stop level points accepted by the broker. And if our trailing stop loss points are not less than the broker's requirement, then in that case, everything is fine. So we just say current trailing stop value of whatever is the TSL value coming out of the calculation or from user input is okay. So that's the first check that we do at the beginning. Then just for the tester, before we check for whether or not the indicator height is true or not, we start with a default value of tester height indicator as false. And then if the user has selected the value as true, then only we convert it into true. So let's start with a default value and then change it to whether the user has selected the indicator hiding as true. And now that we have assigned the values of the TP point, SL point, trigger point here, whether it's fixed pips or as a percentage, so we don't need to do this in on tick function. So here we don't have to check whether it's system choice 1, 2 or 3. We have already done that on the initialization. So we can remove this part. And now if I compile, I have these 4 errors because we removed these SH choice, EH choice and EH choice. So we can replace it with SH input, EH input, and EH input, which are the variables here, where we're asking the user to provide when to start the trading and when to stop the trading. So we remove these 2 and replace it by the ones below. Compile now, we still have one more error, and that is the closing code expected. And this is, we didn't have the closing code. Compile now, we don't have any errors. So this concludes our creation of the Propfirm panel and then getting the values for those variables so we can populate these variables. But now we need to go back to the Propfirm panel and create an update function so that these variables that we have now calculated can be populated here. So we go back to Propfirm panel and we create a function which is the panel chart event, which is the one that we created here. So we create that, we provided the ID, the long parameter, double parameter, and the string parameter. And we just say chart event is whatever is the ID passed on to it, whatever is the long parameter, double parameter, and the string parameter that's passed on to it. And then we close the function. And then we create this last function, which is update, where we will update the values in the panel. And then we go down to the bottom and we create another function for the class C Propfirm. The function name is update. And then we start updating the values in these labels from those variables. So the first one, the name of this label was bb_1d. So we say bb_beginning balance 1d dot text is, it used to be only this. And now we can add to it the variable value of beginning of day balance that we have created here and populated the value here. So now we are starting to use the values from the actual EA into the panel. So that's the first one. Then we have the 7-day text, the 30-day text, and the all-time text. So we start with whatever is the text before from here, and then just add to it the value of the values that we are getting from the variables here. So we start populating the panel with the values. Because these variables are going to return a double value and the text is going to be in a string, so we need to first convert it into a string before adding it to the labels. I'm going to do it for the rest as well, which is the equity high, 1-day text, 7-day text, 30-day text, and all-time text, and adding to it the value of the variables that we calculated back into the label by converting them to strings and then adding it. Then the same for drawdown 1-day text, which is going to be again the initial text, which was today, 7-day, 30-day, and all time, but then adding to it the percentage values that we're going to get from the 1-day percentage variable that we calculate here and here and here. And then the same goes for profit labels, which we calculated here, here, and here. So we update the values from those variables back into the panel labels by adding to whatever text was before, and then adding this value as a string, and then going a string substructure so that it can be converted properly. And after that, we first say whatever was the color before, so input text colors of the drawdown values, the 1-day, 7-day, 30-day, and all time, as whatever was the chosen color by the user. But then in case if the 1-day drawdown percentage is lower than whatever is the max allowed. So if the max allowed was 3%, so it's -3. If it turns out to be lower than that, so it's in a way it's bigger than 3% drawdown, then change the color to tomato, which is the red color. So we can see it very easily on the panel whenever we have gone above the max allowed drawdown. So this is the update in the panel to update the values. But because we are getting the values from this one into this one, so we need to go back up and include this file back into this Propfirm. And the way to do that would be you start with a ... which means from this include folder where this Propfirm panel file that we have created is placed. So go up one folder to here, then go to the experts folder, then to wherever is your Scalping EA, these codes are saved, this one. So what I can do is I can right click on it, this folder, and then open the folder, and then here is my EA. So I'm going to right click on it, check for properties, and copy the location. Copy this location, come back here, paste it below. This is the part that I need from experts. I'll delete the rest. And then I have to paste it here as expert, YouTube, Scalping EA, Scalping Propfirm. which is this folder. And then within that folder, I have the file as Scalping Propfirm version. So I need to say Scalping Propfirm _version. And this is why you cannot have spaces here, because then you're not going to be able to define the values here in a simple way. So the easiest way is to just put underscore in the names of the MQ5 file that you create so that you can reference it easier. Now, if you compile, you're going to get a lot of errors, because now that we are referencing to this file, we can no longer compile it from within the Propfirm panel. We need to compile it from here. And if you compile it from here, then you're not getting any error. So both these files are compiled into one EA, because this EA is already including the Propfirm panel, and this Propfirm panel is referencing back to Scalping Propfirm version MQ5 file. So you cannot compile it anymore from here. You can only compile it from here. Now that we have created this update function here to refresh the values from the variables, we now need to go back to the Scalping Propfirm version, come down to the onTick function, and here, before we check for is trading allowed, we're gonna do the panel.update. So the panel can then call on within the Propfirm panel the update function that we have just created here. And then the last thing we're gonna do before we start with the trailing stop loss modifications is to come down to the bottom and add this one more function, which is the on chart event function, which you can simply copy paste from here as well if you want to, which is exactly the same function from there, but then we put it here as well. Now if we compile, we don't have any errors. And now if I go back to MetaTrader, we can now see that the opening balance, the beginning balances and everything is getting updated. The equity highs for today, the drawdowns and the profit percentages are all being calculated within the panel. So this concludes our panel, and now we can go back up to the trailing stop function, because that is the last modification we're going to make to include within the trailing the option to trail by the last candle, the option to trail by fast moving average, and the option to trail by Ichimoku Tenkan-sen line. Go back all the way back up, and here after the percentage of price, I'm going to add one more group and call it trailing stop management. And here we're going to include our trailing stop management. But before that, I go back up here and I create another enum, and let's call it TSL type, which is going to be the default trail, which is the aggressive stop loss movement like normal scalping EA that we have. But then we're also going to add the option to select previous candle, a fast moving average, or a Tenkan-sen line. So now that we have this enum available, we can use it here, and we say that the user needs to input what trail type does he want to apply by using this TSL type that we have just created here. So for example, now if I compile and go back to MetaTrader, then here I should see a new trailing stop loss management. And here now the user has the option to select which one does he want to use. And then in case he wants to use candles to trail the stop loss, then he needs to define how many candles to trail it on. So how many candles on the left to trail it on. And in case he chooses fast moving average, then what is the fast moving average value that he wants to trail it on. Tenkan-sen is Tenkan-sen, and the default trail is default trail, then that we don't need to define. So with these variables, we go down now to initialization function, and then where we were creating the handles, we add two more handles. So if the trailing of the stop loss type equals 2, which is the moving average type, then the handle of the trailing MA equals IMA, and handle Ichimoku equals Ichimoku. Now we haven't created these two variables, so I'm gonna go back up here, and where we had created these two handles, I'm gonna add to it handle of trailing moving average and handle of Ichimoku, so that we can initialize it here, and then we pass on the values of the time frame, the fast moving average period that the user defines here, and in case of Ichimoku, then the time frame and the standard value of Ichimoku cloud, which is 9, 26 and 52. So now that we have created these handles as well, now we can use these values. So we go to the trailing stop loss function and start modifying it. I'm going to create two more variables here. The first one is going to be an integer variable for stop level, so that we can get from the broker what is the minimum stop level required. And then I'm also creating an indicator buffer because I'm going to be copying the values of the fast moving average and Ichimoku. Now, before we had this function, up until here, we're going to keep the function as it is because what we're doing is we're running through the positions. We're selecting it by index, getting the ticket number, and then we go, okay, well, if it is input magic number is our magic number and its symbol is our symbol, then we know it's our trade. Then we check whether it's a buy type, and if it's a buy type, then we check whether or not the price has moved above the trigger of the trailing stop loss. And in that case, we assign the value of the take profit to the variable TP that we created here. But after that, we add one more condition, which is if the position stop loss currently is below the opening price, which means that it is still the initial stop loss and it hasn't moved, because once it has moved with the aggressive trailing stop loss, then it will be above the opening price. So if it is below the opening price still, that means it's still the original stop loss. And then we say that the stop loss now is going to be equal to bid minus TSL point, so the new aggressive stop loss. And then we don't need this condition, and we just say, in that case, change the trade, modify the position by sending it the ticket and the stop loss and TP values that we have just calculated. Move it properly. So what's happening here is once we know that this is our trade and it is a position type buy, and then the price has moved above the trigger of the stop loss points, then we check if the stop loss, the original, the stop loss of the position currently is below the opening price, which means this is still the original stop loss. Only in that case, we change the stop loss to TSL point and then change the stop loss to the new stop loss. So above the price, meaning break even. But once it has moved to break even, then it's going to be above the price open, in which case this is not going to happen again. So once it is above the break even, then we don't want to do anything. And then we're going to loop through all of the cases depending on how the user has defined how he wants to trail the stop loss. But the first time the stop loss is going to move is as soon as it can move to the break even, we move it. And then we switch through the cases and say, switch through the trail type. So which trail type has the user selected? And if it's case 1, which means is the normal aggressive trailing of the stop loss, in that case, a stop loss is going to be bid minus the TSL point, just like here, exactly the same. And in that case, break, so don't run anything below. If it is case 1, then the user has selected to move the stop loss on the previous candle or whatever number of candles. In that case, the stop loss is going to be the low of whatever candle number the user has selected. So if the user has set 1, then it's the previous candle. If the user has set 2, then it's the previous from previous candle. So the low of that will be the stop loss, and then break, because you don't want to run the rest of the function. If it's case 2, then we're looking at fast moving average as the trailing stop loss. In that case, we use the copy buffer function to copy the value of the moving average main line from the last candle and paste that value into the indicator buffer variable that we have created here. Set the array as a series so that it's in order, and then break. And then in case it is case number 3, then we're going to use the handle Ichimoku, and from that we're going to copy the Tenkan-sen line for the last candle into the indicator buffer, and then we set the stop loss to be equal to that indicator buffer, so the Tenkan-sen line value from the previous candle, and then break. So here we are now assigned stop losses based on which trail type has been selected by the user. And once we have that, now we can say if the stop loss is above the last stop loss, because we only want to move the stop loss upward, and the calculated stop loss value is not 0, because that can be an error, and the stop loss is bigger than the price open, so it is in positive territory, and the stop loss is lower than the bid, because you can have a situation where on a candle, the candle went above, but then the price comes down, in which case the price has actually come below the low of the candle, in which case the stop loss that we're sending is going to be an invalid stop because it's going to be above the bid. So we need to check that it is below the bid. And then if those conditions are met, then modify the position by sending the ticket, the stop loss and the TP values. And the stop loss values are going to come from here depending on which case has been selected. Now if I compile, I don't have any errors, which means that the parentheses are probably okay. And then we go else if, If the position type is sell, then we're going to follow exactly the same logic by checking if ask price has come down below the open price minus the trigger point, so it has moved more than the trigger point below, in which case we set the TP. But then for the stop loss, we have to go through exactly the same logic as before, where we say if the position info of the stop loss is bigger than the price open, meaning it is still the original stop loss, then we do the aggressive trailing by setting the stop loss to ask plus the TSL point like before, and then changing the stop loss value by providing it the ticket number, SL and TP. So this is only going to happen when you still have the original stop loss and the price has moved more than the trigger of the stop loss point in our favorable direction. So we move it to break even. After it has moved to the break even, then we do the same thing, which is switching through the trail type. And then if it's case 0, then the stop loss is going to be the aggressive stop loss, which is going to be the same as here. But if it is case 1, which is the last candle or last from last candle, then in that case, the trailing stop is going to move on the high of the candles, whatever number of candles the user has defined. If it's case 2, then it's moving on fast moving average, in which case we copy buffer into the indicator buffer from the handle trail of MA, the main line for the last candle. And then we set the stop loss to that indicator buffer value, which is the fast moving average. And in case if it is case 3, the trail type, then we are looking for the Ichimoku. And in that case, we take the handle Ichimoku, the Tenkan-sen line for the last candle, and copy it into indicator buffer. And then we set the stop loss to indicator buffer 0 value, which is going to be the Tenkan-sen line of the last candle. And then we break. So now we have our stop loss calculated based on the trail type. So then we can go that if the stop loss is lower than the initial stop loss, or whatever is the current stop loss of the position, and it's not 0, so there is no calculation error, and that the stop loss is below the price open, because we only want to trail it once it's below the price, once it is in profit, and also the stop loss is greater than ask, otherwise the new stop loss is going to be an invalid stop loss, so we check for this condition as well. And if those conditions are met, then we modify by sending the ticket number, the SL based on whatever calculation comes from here, and the TP value. And then we don't need this, because we have already, instead of just sending the aggressive stop loss, we have now gone through these cases, so we delete this one. If I compile, I don't have any errors. Put this on the screens, because here the parentheses are extremely important. So you can pause the video here and copy these codes. So this is page 1. And this is page 2. And this is page 3. And from there onwards here. So try to put the parentheses exactly in the same position where I have put them. And that covers the trailing stop loss as well. And I compile now. And everything seems to be fine. In which case, if I go back here, now we have all of the functions available. So you have the width of the panels that you can change. You have the trading type. You have the trading system. So fixed is going to be used for Forex, and percentage of price is going to be used for other classes. Then you can select the lot size based on fixed, percentages of equity, balance or margin, in which case you have to define what those values are, the time frame and everything from before. The chart color when the EA is inactive, I like to use it as purple, so you can change it. Then black when the trading is allowed. Then here you define the Forex profiles, if you're applying it on a Forex pair. And here you apply the percentage of price method, if you're applying it on Bitcoin, gold, US indices, oil, and things like those. Then what is the trailing stop loss type? So default trail is going to be the aggressive trail. So as with the TSL values. So with the TSL values here and here. But now you also have the possibility to trail the stop loss by previous candle on fast moving average or Tenkan-sen line. after it has moved to the break even. So the break even move is still going to be as soon as it can. And then you have the news filter from before, you have the RSI filter from before, and you have the moving average filter from before. Then we added also the is trading allowed by day, which day it is allowed. And then we have the Propfirm settings of what is the initial balance, what is the target profit, and what are the values of the drawdowns allowed, and when do you start the challenge. And these values are going to be updated in this panel as you move along. In case if we run into drawdown more than what is allowed for today, the trading will be stopped and the chart is going to turn into purple. And once we have reached the profit target all time, then it's going to turn into green and the trading will be stopped as well. So this is it for the changes and modifications. If I find any error in the way that I've written the code or explained them, I'll update that. Do test it thoroughly before you decide to apply it, because these are very complex codes. So until next time, guys, stay safe, trade safe.